I'm John Beaudin. We're up to our entire series on. I'm John Beaudin. We're up to our entire interview with Graeham Goble of the Little River Band. This is, I think, the fourth time I've talked to him. He's always a delightful man to talk to, very insightful, responsible for many of their hits, but most notably their biggest, Reminiscing, which is at almost 100 million streams, reached the top 10 in the all over the world. We talk about John Farnham, the guy who replaced Glenn Shorrock. Then Glenn Shorrock came back as lead singer. We talk about the hits that he wrote and a few that he didn't. Graeham Goble on Rock History Book. How you been, by the way?
I'm good, really good at the moment. It's no, I have been good. I've had really no health issues. I'm good. I'm really well and enjoying getting back into doing a bit of press for these new releases, getting a good reaction to it. Did you get my email from last night? I sent you an email.
I did, yes.
And, I guess you've listened to a bit of the new stuff.
All of it?
Yeah. Great. And I'm very proud of it. It was 5 years in the making. So it's basically all my work, particularly Masterpieces was something I've wanted to put out for years and years because there's been so many great cuts that have lost attention because the actual albums have been deleted. So Universal has sort of been relying on the old greatest hits, and that's all people could really know. And now I'm hoping with Masterpieces, it's going to, make people realise that we weren't just about the hits. We were about serious playing and singing.
That's what I like about it. I knew your catalog quite well, but I go back and I listen to these songs and I'm going, oh my God, Curiosity Killed the Cat, which wasn't big here.
No, it wasn't.
Emma, and I'm listening to these three, three of the bigger ones in the beginning, every day of my life, and I'm going, oh, I haven't heard these in ages.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice.
It's great. It's a great place to have the catalogue, and also finally put our faces on the cover. This was the big thing that I wanted to do, so as hopefully the US band won't be autographing our greatest hits anymore like they have been for the last 20 years, and let people know that these are the people that recorded the music. Yeah.
Graeham, since you gave me that statement, I think it was a couple of years ago now, or maybe short, it doesn't matter. Since you sent me that statement, you realize, and I don't know if you know, but it touched a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have known. There's a lot of Fairweather music fans. I think I might have told you once I was outside of a Roy Orbison concert. I went in and I was the guy who was in charge to talk to people and ask them, what was your favorite songs after the show?
Yeah.
And the majority of them they couldn't come up with a song because they love all the music, but they's Pretty Woman all over and over again. And that's okay. There's a lot of Fairweather music fans. They buy the music and that's okay. Yeah. But there's never enough reminders to let listeners know the source.
That's correct. And as the years are going by, we're basically left with tribute bands, and that's all we're going to be left with very, very soon. I would say in the next 10 years, pretty much all the great acts won't be touring or playing anymore. And so people are a bit lazy. They don't want to go back and find the source. I mean, even the people, like a lot of the 60s stuff, that came from earlier. A lot of it came from the 50s and even 40s. And yet people are not familiar. They don't know Louis Armstrong. They don't know Cole Porter. They don't know Glenn Miller. They don't know the Johnny Mercer, the great writers from the past, because people are probably too busy and they probably don't care. And it's like with everything, even in the area of design, if you see a beautiful piece of furniture or fabric, how many people go back and find the history of that? Great fragrances, all of that, it came from somewhere. We didn't invent any of that around this time. And so, so that's the whole thing, in that the masterpieces and ultimate hits for a Little River Band, hopefully people will read the 6,000 word bio that's in there and put it all into perspective.
Yeah. And, has there been any movement or anything? Things are the same when it comes to the band name. Nothing's really changed, right, since the last time we talked?
It'll never change, other than really the US band with Wayne Nelson out front is getting pretty tired. I mean, I saw something the other day, a couple of minute clip, and Wayne's getting up there a bit, and it's his voice is nothing like the wonderful voice he used to have. And but interestingly, I saw a comment. Someone said, "Look, you know that this is what on the YouTube. You know that this is not the real band. It's got no original members in it." And then a response to that was, "We don't care. We just want to hear the music." That was sort of like, it's either this or nothing. And so that was one person's post. But I think that represents a section of the public that think, well, I mean, because the public do go to tribute bands, and that's fine. Like if they're, and we would be fine if they were calling themselves a tribute band. It's just that they still are using, even a couple of weeks ago, using Glenn Shorrock's picture to advertise their show. This is not right, and the promoters are doing this. They use our music to make people think, well, this is how it will sound. Well, of course, it doesn't sound anything like that at all, and that's the thing that's wrong. So if you're going to see a tribute band, you know that, okay, these are not the real guys, and it doesn't sound like the original, but we're here to enjoy the music, and that's fine. You know, me and ABBA have got a number of tribute bands out that they would endorse. And there's an Australian tribute band called Cool Change that I endorse. They're a good band, but they're not pretending to be us. Everyone's well aware that they're just presenting the music.
You know, there's someone, I got to tell you, let me just interrupt. Someone had said on my comment, keep that thought. Someone had said in my comment that one of the members had signed a greatest hits or something. I'm paraphrasing, but he looked up at the fan and said, by the way, none of us are on this album.
Yeah. So why would they sign it? I mean, and members, at least one member of their band said, it's such a great feeling to walk out on stage and get a 5-minute encore before we even play a note. I mean, how can they do that? I mean, really, it's extraordinary. So that won't ever change unless Steve Housden one day has an epiphany and just returns the name to where it should be and close down their website. That's really all we look for. We won't be performing again because we've gotten to an age where that won't be possible. But there will be a film, John. There will be a musical. I've written a wonderful film and musical about this whole story, about my life, which includes the incredible situation of losing our name, the betrayal within the band. All of that will be a part of this wonderful musical that we've got, that we're actually looking now actively for investment to make this movie. Because when you look at the Bohemian Rhapsody movie, what that's done for Queen, we've got a catalogue that can, and a story that's heart-wrenching for a lot of people. It would be very dynamic. And so that's where all my energies are going these days. I've spent a few years putting together the ultimate hits and masterpieces. Now that's done. The whole catalogue has been remastered and will be coming out next year on CD. And not too far away, like in 2025, we start celebrating 50 years for the first album, like the Beatles have done. So there'll be the Little River Band album will come out in 2025 with a vinyl and a special release, and that will be honouring the 50-year anniversary. But to me, the way to kick it out of the park is a film, is a musical, because then the world will really get to know what happened, but also then celebrate this great band and the wonderful music and singing that we did, that was arguably as good as anything anyone's ever done.
Well, remember that quote from Glenn Frey, the greatest singing band in the world. And as you were describing it, other guys representing this, You can't have other guys representing this when Glenn Frey tells the original guys the greatest singing band in the world. You know?
Yeah, but they use that in their advertising, you see. That
Uh,
and it's just disgraceful because it's not right, you know, because all they're saying is that they're saying he said that about Little River Band. He didn't. He said it about the original singers and the records. That's what he was talking about. But they anyway. Well, enough about them. That I think that they've lived with, particularly Wayne and Stephen, have lived with this deception and this representation, or should I say, misrepresentation, for many, many, many years. And surely, well, not surely, it is taking a toll on their inner life. It has to. If you just get up every morning and go out and have to hide part of who you are in the world, but also endure as it becomes wider known, endure the vitriol and the well, basically abuse that comes towards them from all over the world. I wouldn't enjoy that at all, and you can't just put that out of your mind. So I think inevitably it will wind down, but whether Stephen would hand it on and get someone else to go and do it, I don't know. And quite frankly, it doesn't occupy a lot of my time these days. I'm moved beyond that, and I'm on to let's make a movie, let's make a musical. Yeah. That's what I'm working toward.
One last thing about that. Years ago, someone had told me that I just got into radio in the early 80s, and I was talking about, because cocky, right? You're young and you're cocky, you're 22 years old, and someone came up to me and said, reputation is not your job. Your reputation is other people's job. You represent yourself well, be held accountable, learn, don't get defensive, all blah, 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 all those nice mother statements. But reputation, they're going to decide what your reputation is.
Yes.
And that hit me.
Well, and it's so true. But of course, I think the number one thing particularly in public life, but even maybe even more so in private life, is respect. I mean, if you, it's nice to sort of feel at the end of the day that there are people that respect you for your work and your honesty and your integrity, all of those things. And if you're living without respect, that's a very big burden to carry through life. And so that's the way I see it, is that I know with the original band, we've got respect by the truckload. I mean, people understand that we had standards, and it's there for everybody to hear on masterpieces and ultimate hits. So we're very proud of that. You know, we can hold our head high, and maybe one day we will get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It will be us. It won't be anyone else. It'll be the originals. But that's what would happen.
That's what would happen. A lot of people criticize Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but if you guys got in, it would be you guys.
Of course it will be. Yeah. I know.
Reminiscing, you were talking about the going back in time of the building blocks. Speaking of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but the building blocks that led to this, that led to that. Every time, reminiscing made me look back. I know you're very proud of that song, biggest hit in the United States. John Lennon liked it. But was that where you were when you put that together? Were you in a melancholy mood? What was the impetus to that?
No, okay. So I've talked about this a lot, particularly recently, but I'll try and just say it in a different way. I started writing songs when I was about 13, was about my first song. And I lived a very insular life. I basically lived in my bedroom writing songs. If I wasn't at work, I used to work for the government as a clerical position. But I would, like, for instance, come home on a Friday night, get into my pajamas and spend the whole weekend in my room writing songs, and that's what I did all the time. And then out of that, when I got a lot of songs, I started forming bands and to play my own music, etc., etc. But I was very, very insular. I had a lot of anxiety issues when I was young, and so I didn't participate really in a teenage life. But where it was all happening for me was internally, because the fantasy life of the television, like we got TV when I was 12. So I started to see Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers. I started to see the movies of the Jeanette MacDonald, Nelson Eddy, the musicals of Rodgers and Hammerstein. And so that drew me in big time. And so in those early years, that's the music I was listening to, was that. And that was the life that I wanted to have. It was the fantasy life of having your girl, going to the prom. We didn't have the prom in Australia, but going to that, walking her home with the picket fence and the street lights. And I thought to myself, one day that's what I want to have, this perfect fantasy life, because I had not experienced any relationship at all in the real world, in the outside world. So then when I was 16, and I met this wonderful girl at work, and she became my this person that I felt that I would marry, and it just, I was very shy. It just never ever went forward. But I remained that she eventually, she became the muse for a lot of my writing for probably maybe in the next 30 years. And she, even though I eventually got married and had 4 children, she was always there in my life. And that's where the inspiration, I could draw upon that feeling of not achieving what I wanted, but I could draw upon that for writing all sorts of songs. So when it came to Reminiscing, and many other songs, but and there were other inspirations as well, but it was mainly her. She planted that emotion in me that I could draw upon, of how it feels to want something that you can never have, or that you're unable to achieve, to get in your life. So we were doing a TV show one day, in, I think it was 1977, I think, in Australia, and we were in the green room, and I was, and our guitarist David Briggs, we were just playing guitar, and he showed me a C9 chord. It was a shape that I had not learned before or known, because I'm not a trained musician, John. I've learned by watching other great players like David and different people playing in the band, and if they play something, I said, "Oh, could you show me that?" Interestingly, he also showed Beeb the chords for Happy Anniversary, because that was sort of like a jazz shape that Beeb didn't know. So Beeb wrote or co-wrote Happy Anniversary because he saw a guitar shape and just started strumming on it. So with Reminiscing, I had this C9 chord. So then when I went home from the TV show, sat down in my room, picked up my guitar, and just doodling a bit with this chord, and immediately the whole melody lyric of Reminiscing just poured into me. And in under a half an hour, I reckon 20, 25 minutes, I just was almost like downloading this song, because I started with that chord, but then as I'm hearing it, I'm like, Friday night, it was like I was dreaming of the night. I'd just slide my hand down until, what chord is this? Find the chord. How to tell you, I want to build. And then just that sort of thing. I was just hearing the lyrics, in the melody, and finding the shapes on my guitar. So melody was attached to a lyric, and then a half an hour I've got it all done. And then I basically had to learn it, because I couldn't play it. I thought, well, okay, what are these chords? I didn't even know what they were. But subsequently, people who are trained musicians, and particularly the jazz people, think it's really a clever piece, because it's got an introduction, and then there's interesting key change in it, and then it goes back to the original key, And so it's an unusual song. So the emotion or the feeling that just I lived with all my life, of not getting the what I wanted in a romantic and intimate life, that is still there, I might say, at my age, but I don't give up hope. I keep it sitting there, but I can go right back to when I was 15, 16 and how she made me feel. And yeah, so that was how it came to be.
That's an art, though. I think that, moving out out east, I keep forgetting where I'm at. I found my journals. So I'm reading, you're reading someone else's words, even though it's yourself. And it's like a deep vacuous hole of emotional need ready to suck the life right out of you. And you're talking about yourself, but that's what happens. All those rite of passages haven't happened yet. But is the fact that you were isolated in some ways, it's a similar thing for me in a lot of ways. I was very shy, still deal with some of that. I'm still in contact with that little boy, and he helps me now and I help him. But is there the talent to be able to portray that feeling? Did it help the fact that you were isolated? Weren't you in tune with you? I mean, for me, I was afraid of my feelings, but I was also kind of in tune with them. I could play with them a little bit.
Yeah. So the question.
Well, the question is because you were isolated, is that why you're able to? Because I've just listened to I was listening to all your songs and I'm going, they still sound as good as they did before, but I feel them when I listen to them. I can feel them.
Well, okay. So I think that apart from what helped me to write the quality of songs that I did was, firstly, I was mainly from a very young age really in tune with the fact that I'm not doing this on my own. I always felt there was a spiritual almost entity overshadowing me, but certainly working with me. And I would acknowledge that and know that even if in later years when I was looking for a chorus for something, I would actually say, I need some help here, like I'm asking for help. And more often than not, I would wake up in the early hours of the morning with maybe a chorus there or something like that. So I recognized that I believe, and I recognize that myself, but I think we are not a solo journey. We are working with help, with no matter what our direction in life is, we've got help from the spirit world with our life. And many cultures believe this. I mean, the American Indians, for a start, and the Australian Aboriginal people, they understand that they're not just walking the earth unguided, we're helped. And so firstly, I had developed an ability to be able to write this. I had the courage to write and speak about how I was feeling internally. That's the other thing. That if you're not happy to stand up in front of any amount of people and say, look, I suffered anxiety, I was this, I was that, I have not achieved what I wanted in life in a romantic sense, all of the things that I'm very comfortable in talking about, I was able to write about that. So when we talk about a song like Reminiscing, but particularly when you talk about a song like Take It Easy on Me, I mean, I felt that. And one person said to me, look, this is the best breakup song they'd ever heard. But you see, some people wouldn't be prepared to expose their soul and their inner feelings the way I've always been able to do that and talk to people and say, I do suffer anxiety. And the reason I was isolated, John, was because I was suffering anxiety. Yeah. Seriously. I mean, I would vomit most mornings going to work just to try and I get so anxious about stuff. I would just throw up on my way to work because I would just, when in my early gigs, I couldn't eat for 4 days before a show because I was just so freaked out. And in fact, when I formed my first band, The Silence, I got so sick all the time, and so anxious that I just made a decision. I just can't do this, and I decided to stop the band. And I thought, well, I would like to be a musician, but I can't because I just get too sick. But it got to the point where I realised, but I have to do this. So I just pushed on and I did it. And I might say it saved my life, because if I hadn't pushed through and then got to a point where the anxiety level started to come down, because we started to play every night. And so it slowly got less and less and less. So I think it was the public performances in the pubs of Adelaide and forcing me into a situation that I was so uncomfortable in. I was actually comfortable on stage, but the fear was bizarre, because the fear was, what if I can't go on stage? What if I get on stage and I have to throw up or something? What am I going to do? This is all this rubbish mind games that you go through. And I went through that in spades and spades. And so when it came to pursuing a relationship, I had the same barrier there. How could I ever go out with a girl, go to a drive-in, or do this or do that? What if I get sick, or what if I can't do it? And so I get to a point where I better not go there. I'll stay in my room and write about what I would like to experience, rather than going and do it. But my music career forced me to do it.
Yeah,
I couldn't not do it. But
did you learn tricks? Did you learn tricks though? Sorry to interrupt you, but did you learn? I learned tricks. There was a guy, the band called Trooper in Canada. And one day he saw me backstage. I was going to introduce them. And I was really nervous. He could see the radio guy going to introduce the band. And this is a trick that I learned. I mean, you've probably got a lot more than me, but I use this trick almost all the time. And he said, well, are you okay? He said, well, and he came up to me. He said, well, how did you feel in school when you had to talk in front of the class? And I went, oh my God, this guy's making it worse. He's the leader of the band, Ray McGuire. And I went, well, I got up there and I made a fool of myself, and I went back and sat down. And he says, Den, when you sat down, what did you want to do? I said, actually, I wanted to go back up there and redo it and do it right. And he looked at me straight in the eyes and he says, I look forward to you introducing us for a second time. And he says, play it out. But did you have tricks that somehow overcoming that? I mean, the audience is naked thing. Did you use tricks, or how did you do it?
I didn't have anything in the early days other than just my will. And what I decided very young is that I would say yes to everything, in terms of going to, if I had to do something, then I would just say yes to it, and then basically suffer through it.
Right.
And it took a long time. By the time it wasn't like it. It may have been 5, 6, 7, 8 years, I don't know, but eventually I got to a point, particularly what I observed was when I was tired, what happened when I started to tour, I was tired pretty much all the time because we were working all the time. I just didn't have the energy to get anxious, and I felt that being tired was a very good antidote for it. So I was very good once we started touring and playing a lot. That was the thing that assisted me a lot. But so I was a workaholic. I worked. If I'm in my environment of working and tired and just pushing myself physically and mentally to my limits, that keeps my mind active and kept my mind off of the situation. So it just played out. But you see, I think, and Rudolf Steiner talks about this, is that suffering, it can give you substance. It can give you a depth that a person that doesn't have a lot of suffering. I mean, a lot of people want to, when they suffer, they turn to alcohol or drugs or cigarettes or something. I never did that. I for whatever reason, I just endured the suffering, and it slowly became less and less and less.
You felt your way through it? You just felt your way through it?
Just the will to do it, in that whatever I needed to do, I would just do. But by the time, Little River Band got formed, I was really good. It visited me big time again when I left LRB and I was home with not a lot to do. I had a lot of panic attacks for maybe the next 10 years in my 40s and 50s. I haven't had a panic attack now for quite a number of years, and maybe it's gone forever. But I don't say that for sure. But I protect myself. I don't, I probably haven't been out to dinner more than once or twice in the last 15 years. I just, if people ask me out, I say, well, look, we can have a lunch or something, but I don't want to go out to dinner. Mm-hmm. I just don't like that feeling of being committed to, okay, we're going to dinner 8:00 Friday night. If you said to me, look, come to Canada, I'll take you out to a restaurant, we'll go out next Thursday, that would immediately, I wouldn't enjoy my time until I got there. Once I got there, I'd be all right.
Me too. Yes.
Yeah. But I wouldn't enjoy it if you said, oh, God, next Friday night, I've got to go out to dinner with John. And there have been occasions where people that I know well and people that know me, I just say to them, look, I don't want to do it. It's not that I don't want to see you. I just don't want the angst of between now and then what I have to do to go through it. But curiously, once I'm there, I have the time of my life. I mean, I love talking to people and just sitting down. And from what I can gather, people enjoy talking to me too, and that's why they invite me. But the people that know me don't invite me because they know that I don't really want to go.
Yeah,
I want to go, but I don't want to put myself through what it will take me to accept an invitation.
What were you like in school? What were you like when you were going to school? Because for me, I had a lot of similar things.
No, it came when after I left school.
Really?
I didn't have it then.
Huh. With doing these two albums, which I really enjoyed, doing these two albums together, what's the sense for you? Like, I mean, I mentioned a while ago, going through some people say sometimes it's like a journal. An album is like a year in your life. It represents, and I know this is a band and there are many different pieces, but what was it like for you to go back and put these two together?
Well, it was something that I've wanted to do for years and years and years. And as I said earlier in our interview, the main impetus was to put a spotlight on some incredible tracks that we did, and even on Ultimate Hits, the last song, which is Forever Blue, that was our biggest hit in Europe that no one else has ever heard. But my daughter rang me the other day. She's coming up to 32, and she said, I just heard Forever Blue for the first time. She said, that's incredible, Dad. I've never even knew that you recorded that or wrote that or co-wrote it, should I say. And so the first time she heard it, it instantly became a favourite. And I know that when people buy Ultimate Hits, because this is the first time Forever Blue's been on one of our Ultimate Hits, and I included it because it was a massive hit for us in the Netherlands, in Europe. But now when people hear this, firstly, they'll hear an incredible vocal from John Farnham, but they'll hear just an amazing band, an amazing song, which I co-wrote with my friend Stephen Foster. There's a great story about Forever Blue that if you want to, I could share that.
Of course.
It was recorded in 1980, late 85, on our last album, the No Rains album. And a friend of mine, Stephen Foster, who was a songwriter that I'd known from the 70s, and Stephen passed away a few years ago, but he wrote this song 12 years earlier, and it was called Sometimes I Wish I Was a Sailor. He had two verses, and he played me this song, and I thought, this is fantastic. He said, would you like to have a shot at writing a chorus for it? He said, I've tried with two other songwriters and they haven't been able to write a chorus. So I said, well, I'll give it a shot. I don't know. We'll see what happens. So he'd had this song for 12 years. And so then in 1985, we were recording the No Rains album. and I had these two verses, and then I had it for about 3 months, and I was unable to come up with a chorus. And so one night, I actually said a prayer, send me the chorus. And I woke up next morning, John, and this chorus, which is currently in the song, was there. A great line in it, which blew me away because I didn't write it, but it came through, was the chorus is, sometimes I close my eyes and drift away. I can't forget the things I didn't say. I thought, what a line. What a great line. It's not been said before in a song that I know of. Mm-hmm. It is a great song because this is the regret. And then, of course, the title of Being Forever Blue, that obviously came from me because there's a sadness in me that is forever blue. Even though I'm a really optimistic and happy guy, there's a sadness in me that song came from there and on high as well. So anyway, we recorded Forever Blue, and then the No Rains album, which was our last album for Capitol, came out, and of course it sank like a stone. There was no interest in it. The band was finished as far as Capitol was concerned, and that just sat there. So that's 1985. So then 10 years later, a DJ in Holland, in the Netherlands, starts playing Forever Blue every night in his radio show, every night. And we'd been broken up for years. And then suddenly people are ringing up about this song, and then they start buying it. And it just, I don't know where it went to, but it was a massive hit because he just started playing it. Now, my friend Stephen Foster, who was, he'd never written a hit in his life, and this was a co-write between us. He, in Australia, like we've got, as songwriters, we used to get an annual check from APRA, which is like BMI that they collect royalties for radio airplay, and then we used to get an annual payment. And Stephen, throughout his life, would go out to the mail. It used to be in January, I think, and he would get maybe $20 or $30 for his payment for the year for all the songs that was getting played. So in he goes out in it was 22 years since he'd written that. Sometimes I Wish I Was a Sailor. He goes out and there's a check for $50,000 in the mail. He nearly died. I mean, really.
Oh my God, that's beautiful.
Based on all of the airplay coming out of the Netherlands on that song.
What a beautiful moment, eh?
It just gives me a thrill because he was such a dear soul, and an amazing writer in his own way, but he'd never written any hits. And I think there's a lot of writers that the thing that made that song was the awesome chorus that was given to me, and then changing the title. But then John Farnham's performance, the band's harmonies, I mean, it's in my top 5 Little River Band songs of all time. And now it's on Ultimate Hits forever. This is our definitive record. And it is such a great song. And boy, it could easily be in a movie. And maybe now, with it having a bit more focus, maybe it can be in a movie.
By the way, cool change with the orchestration in there. Who did that? I mean, I know John Beaudin was involved with you guys. By the way, did you ever ask him about Boston while you were working with him? Did you ever say, hey?
Not that much. I mean, to be honest, like I was very focused on my own thing, and to me, More Than a Feeling was a song. I, with the greatest respect, I don't consider Boston to be a band that I would list in my list of.
Well, you're very different. The music you create is very, very different. Yeah, but cool change. The orchestration at the end is very Paul Buckmaster-ish.
Well, we see all of our orchestrations. were pretty much done by Rick Formosa, who was our guitarist in the first. He played on It's a Long Way There, and then Rick left after the second album to go to Italy to study arranging. I mean, even to this day, I would put Rick Formosa against any arranger in the world. If I had a choice of an unlimited budget to have arranging done, Rick Formosa would be my call.
What's that it factor that he has? What is it that he has to you?
He's Italian for a start, so he's got the romance of the Italians. He's very clever intellectually, but he's a student of arranging. I mean, going right back. I mean, he will talk to you for hours on. I mean, he would be a very interesting interview if you wanted to. But he can talk about everyone in the arranging field. He knows it all, and he's just such a gifted melodic. If you listen to the melodies in his arrangement, I don't know if you've listened to my song "Unlucky in Love" that I put up. I put it up, about 6 months ago. Have you heard that?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah, please.
It is amazing because Rick did the arrangement on that. It's once again, it's a jazz song that I've put up. It's like American Songbook sort of song. Like I wrote it in the 90s, but I finally put it up because I think it's never been recorded and needs to be out there. I actually tried to get it to Diana Crowell, but I didn't get a response. So anyway, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, please do. When you were growing up, or even still as you look back, what are the songwriters where you look and you go, check, check, check? Yeah, they've got it all. The people who inspired you, who were they?
Well, then when I was in early days, but even now, there's not a lot, but certainly David Gates from Bread would be, to me, one of the great writers of all time. His song, well, there's many of them, but Everything I Own, like about his father. I mean, what a tribute, but what a song!
And you feel it.
Well, everyone's got a father, and whether it's a great relationship or a damaged relationship, it still gets you. And that song cuts like a knife, and it's a unique approach to songwriting in that the subject is very unique. You know, and it's, I know that it's written about his father, but it could be about anyone. It could be about a brother. It could be about a lover or a wife or a husband. But his amazing falsetto voice, of course, because that was my role in Little River Band, that was a great inspiration for me. So his songwriting, but Cole Porter was always the number one. Lyric-wise, Johnny Mercer, words and music of Irving Berlin, the American Songbook, the Gershwins, like all of the people that are just legendary and that will live forever in the songwriting world. They were Gus Kahn, who was earlier, but like It Had to Be You. I mean, what an incredible song. I mean, amazing songwriting from these people. Like Al Jolson was recording a lot of those songs. But I was very familiar with all of that. I mean, Rodgers and Hammerstein. Wow. I mean, Rodgers and Hammerstein are the benchmark for my musical. If I can't produce a musical as good as what they've done, I don't want to do it. And so when I was a songwriter, I wanted to write a song as good as Night and Day. And I think I got there maybe with Reminiscing in a different way. You got Night and Day, you got Reminiscing. They're both, I think, 10 out of 10 as a composition. The Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals are the benchmark. And so when I'm now fired up about writing a musical or a film, I've got to set my standard to say, well, I'm shooting for Sound of Music. I'm shooting for Carousel or King and I. It's got to be that good, but it'll be a musical on my life with a score that every song will be iconic in the score. as it was in Rodgers and Hammerstein. I don't want to do an Andrew Lloyd Webber type musical. It's got one or two songs, maybe, if you're lucky. It's not about, it's about having every song to get to you. That's what it needs to be. If there's a song in my musical, then it's got to be heart-wrenching. It's got to be exciting. It's got to rock. It's got to do whatever it needs to do. And I fortunately have got the songs to do this, because I've got a very wide palette of songs that I can write, from jazz through to rock. So I know we've got the ingredients, and I know where my standards for this show sit. And all I need is the money. So I need somebody to really understand that there is a wonderful show, film story here, but I need an angel investor to want to really bring this into the world.
When I first heard Reminiscing, and it's a thing, maybe there's a name for it, I'm not a songwriter, but there is like the phrasing. If you would have given me those first 3-4 lines of that song, I never would have come up with the phrasing and the bounce of that song, because I love when songwriters come up when it's complicated. There's lots of, I'm doing this, I'm going this. Like, Elton John's early songs were like that. Then by the 80s, he was doing Little Genie. Of course, he got his genius back. It wasn't the same, but they're just songs. It's like they go da na 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 na, and they're like anthems now. You know, a lot of the young people are doing those things, but that's not like complicating phrasing, which is really intricate, and it brings you in and it tells a story, which you were, and still you're really, really good at that.
Well, yes, thank you for that. I don't like to be boring in songwriting, and I when we were talking about songwriters before, I've got to add Roy Orbison into that list, because Roy Orbison didn't follow any rules whatsoever, and I don't follow any rules. So when you think about reminiscing, so I hear just on the one note, Friday night it was late, I was walking you home, we got down to the gate, and I was chord change, dreaming of the night. Okay, now think of Night and Day, like the beat of the tom-tom with the da-da-da-da-da, like the tick-tick-tock of the state, all the one note.
Yeah.
That was not intentionally copied, but it's absolutely a reference, because I can't think of any other song other than Reminiscing and Night and Day that have that, almost like the one-note samba song. It's just one note, but then it's that opening line just sets the whole image for the song. And when I wrote it, because I wasn't thinking about it, I thought, well, hang on a minute, this is not in 4. Like, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, like Friday night, it was late. So it's crossing the beat all the time, but it stays in 4. That was the wonderful thing about it, because when you normally, if you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, Friday night it was late, you would stay on the 1, but I don't do that. I just, it crosses all the time. So I just keep the beat going, the bars, but then I've got my lyric, and that's the way it came through, John. That's the way I could hear it.
To me, it's one of the most interesting songs the band ever recorded.
I've never written anything like that before.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I didn't have the musical sophistication to like a Hans Zimmer or someone that can sit down or a Mozart can sit down and write this. What I can do is that this comes from within me, and I'm as amazed as you might be now that you hear it. I was as amazed in 1977 when that came out. I thought, what in the hell is that? There is no reference for it. I was just amazed, and I'm still amazed, because I can listen to Reminiscing today. I don't hardly ever listen to it, but I think, God, that's an incredible, not only is it an incredible song, but then I was blessed with an amazing band to play it, an amazing singer like Glenn Shorrock to deliver the vocal. But all of the parts in, like Rick Formosa's strings, Peter Jones's Rhodes playing, B. Birtle's riff part in the third verse, the amazing flugelhorn from Bobby Venier at the end. That was a one take. He just walked in, did a warm up, and said, "Okay, now play it again, and I'll have a go." And we said, "No, Bobby, we've already got it. What you played on that warm up, that's going to be it." And he said, "Oh, no, I can do a lot better than that." We gave him 3 more goes, and he didn't do any better than that. And the warm up thing is what's on the record. But it was sort of like it was guided from everywhere. Everyone played. George McArdle took weeks to come up with the amazing bass, but that's essentially one note to the bar, because he started in a complicated way and doing more of a syncopated bass. But then it just happened that he said, "No, I'll play one note to the bar and allow the conga to take the groove. Like, that's coming from the conga. But when you haven't got a conga, the bass player tends to fill it up because there's there. But everyone played with so much space. It left room for Glenn's vocal. It left room for the strings. It left room for the atmosphere of the song. So we had 5, 6 musicians there, 7 musicians with, I think 6 or 7, that respected the space that the song was asking for. And so I think the great records are made by people knowing what not to play.
Mm-hmm.
You see, so if you when you see all the covers and and might I say the American band trying to play Reminiscing, they don't get it. They don't get the space that you could stand on stage and sing that song with no backing and it would still be great. But people want to fill it up because they don't just play the one note and just let it sit, just let the groove take it. But luckily for me, I had a wonderful band that got that, and we nailed it really. And it's a timeless, not only song, but more importantly, it's a timeless recording. It's one of the great. It's perfect. I wouldn't change a note in the whole thing. And interestingly, on the Ultimate Hits, when I was going through all these tapes, I discovered a solo violin intro. Have you heard that? That's on the Ultimate Hits?
Yes. That's really nice.
And I included it on this version. And the reason it wasn't included, and I think it was a good call, was because it was sort of like an introduction to an introduction. So as a single, it was better back in the day to establish a song. But that was actually recorded with the intention of trying to place it in the 40s, like with that sort of solo violin. We didn't use it back in the day in 78 on Sleeper-Catcher, but now that lost intro is on Ultimate Hits.
Yeah, I noticed that. When was it? We touched on it last time or the time before. When was it that you, Glenn, and Beeb like sang like that and realized, like, at what point did you sing together and you must have had that moment to go, wait a minute, like, listen, this is like, I called you guys singing together God. I have God moments. I think I told you before, I'm not a religious guy, but I pray and I meditate and I do all this stuff. But sometimes I'll see something in person. I'll say, that's like God's. I see God in that. Or I'll smell something. I'll say, that smells like God. But to me, the three of you guys.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I want to let me at least say that I think that we are all expressions of the gods. So in other words, your show, where does inspiration come from? And you just look out the door and see the most beautiful nature that's around us. I mean, and the seasons and just everything. This is all just an expression of the gods of the other worlds that I believe. So what happened was that when Mississippi went to England in 1974, and there was Beeb, Derek, and myself, we were a part of Mississippi, and we went to London to try and break the band Mississippi. And of course, that didn't work out. And in a very short time of less than 3 months, we ran out of money and the band had broken up. And so then Beeb and I decided we weren't going to break up, or nor Derek as well. But it was that we needed a lead singer, like a front man. And so Beebe knew, I think it was Beebe probably, that knew that Glenn Shorrock was living in London at that time. And also at that point, our Glenn Wheatley, who became our manager, was living in London. So we went over to Glenn Wheatley's house where he was living, and there was a group in England called the New Seekers. I don't know if they did anything in America or Canada, but
They did, yes.
Yeah. So Peter Doyle was in the New Seekers, and so we did an audition with Peter Doyle singing with Beebe and I, and that was sort of okay. He was a great singer, but it just didn't gel. But then the second audition was Glenn Shorrock coming over to our where Beebe and I were living, and we got out a couple of acoustic guitars and we played "It's a Long Way There" and just taught Glenn. And as soon as we sang that "Hey Everybody, Can't You Feel" with Glenn on the bottom, we thought, wow, this is like, haven't ever heard this before. And so that was it. It was in 1970, late 74. And that's when, because Glenn was pretty jaded at that time. He was thinking of coming back to Australia, maybe going into management or something. He tried twice to go to England. He was in Axiom and then he Twilights, and then he did Esperanto for a little while. So he thought, well, and he loved the song "It's a Long Way There." I think he still lists it, probably his favourite LRB song. So he's still does it in his live shows here. And I think it was the power of our vocals and the magical quality of our vocals that really convinced him, well, I got to give it one more shot. And so that was when we all decided to come back into Australia in early 75 and form a new band. And that was the song that did it. Interestingly, it was the song that we used to always open with. It was the song that broke us in America. I mean, and it's a song that opens Ultimate Hits, which is the new one. So it's just been leading us all the way, and like, it's pretty amazing. I mean,
let's say if you wouldn't have recorded that, let me interrupt you. If you wouldn't have recorded anything after "It's a Long Way There," and someone would have discovered that song, that would be the song people say, these guys could have been the Beatles, or whatever term you wanted to put in there. But that's the song, because you hear it in that song.
It's all there. And Beebe and I and Derek were playing that 3 years before Little River Band. I mean, we were playing as part of our repertoire, but to many, it is their favourite Little River Band song. But it has not got the same worldwide impact of "It's a Long Way" of reminiscing. But in Europe, certainly it does. Like, interestingly, when this was quite a very unusual experience for me, but when I did one interview with a journalist in the Netherlands, and when we got on the Zoom, he said, I mainly want to talk about two songs. And I thought to myself, oh, well, it's going to be Reminiscing and Lady. So I said, yeah, fine, okay. So he said, the two songs I want to talk about is "It's a Long Way There" and "Forever Blue." They're your two biggest hits in the Netherlands. And I thought, this is great, because finally I was able to talk about "It's a Long Way There" and, of course, my wonderful "Forever Blue," which I've spoken about with you. But isn't that fantastic in that as far as the Netherlands are concerned, Reminiscing and Lady and some of our other bigger songs, they're just other great songs from LRB, but they're not the main ones, you see. In the Philippines, sorry, I was just saying.
No, go ahead. You finish that.
In the Philippines, it's a song that Beebe and I had out called "I'm Coming Home." That's the big song in the Philippines, bigger than any LRB song. And that's included, even though I put it on the Ultimate Hits because the whole LRB's playing on that. Glenn's not on it, but Derek and David and George, they're all playing on "I'm Coming Home." It was the second biggest hit we ever had in Australia, behind "Help Us on Its Way," and "I'm Coming Home" was the biggest hit we ever had in the Philippines. That's the song that the fans in the Philippines would possibly buy Ultimate Hits for. So it's a nice thing to have, in that different territories have different songs as their favorite song.
It's like the world greatest hits. You know. By the way, you were mentioning the other guys. I come off the street and I'm talking to you, and I say, "Okay, Glenn Shorrock." To you know the guy. Glenn Shorrock is
What? Oh, you want me to say?
yeah. Just to what he was your lead singer for many years. Glenn Shorrock is
Well, when you said you know the guy, I can't honestly say that I do. I mean, Glenn, Glenn and I had a lot of creative differences, mainly probably caused through my. Well, no, it's caused by my incessant pursuit of excellence and Glenn's lack of patience or interest in saying it's just not worth all that extra effort to get it to some level that only you really care about. We go over and over and over and over stuff like, the Steely Dan experience. I mean, Glenn would have lasted about 3 minutes in Steely Dan, but it's just I got off on that, and Beeb got off on that as well. And I really, all of our Derek and the whole band loved the fact that we would spend weeks trying to get the right groove on something, or if it wasn't right, we just do it again and again and again. And Glenn would just be out of there like in the first 10 minutes. We might rehearse a song, we do 2 bars, and then I just stop the band and say, okay, we weren't together on that opening thing. And Glenn would just roll his eyes and think, oh, good God, can we play the bloody song? I mean, it was just, that was the thing between Glenn and I. Okay, so, and so Glenn tended, because we'd probably talk more about music as a band than we would ever play. And Glenn was not comfortable in that environment, because in many ways Glenn's he's a wonderful entertainer, an amazing singer, but he's not a musician in terms of he's not really a musician, if you understand what I'm saying. And yeah. I don't mean that in a negative way. He's just really can't, or not interested in talking for ad infinitum about how great Stanley Clarke was, or John Coltrane, or like all that. We were interested in all the stuff.
You guys were musicologists. You guys were real musicologists.
Yes, yes, and reading all the musical biographies, whereas Glenn was probably more into film and into different things, a very different set of interests. And so consequently, in a band, or in my experience with Glenn, there wasn't very much, or hardly any, like one-to-one, where, like, even if I wrote a song, like, you would think that, okay, Glenn's going to sing this song, that he would at least want or have a discussion about what's this all about, or, okay, you want me to sing that, or what do you think of this idea? None of that. There was no possibility for me to work with Glenn to maybe suggest a certain line here or there. Glenn would listen to what I'd written a couple of times, and then he would interpret it, okay? And then we'd only redo lines if he was just completely not remembering a certain lyric or something like that. So that was a one-way street, because Glenn was not able to sit down and sing and discuss my songs before he would perform them. That was a big frustration for me. But what was great was when he did perform and sing my songs, the result was spectacular. Okay, so it's almost like him saying, "I don't need your help. I can nail this without your help." It wasn't about that. It was about saying, "Well, okay, you ring up a builder to come and build you a bathroom," and he walks in, and he says, "I'm not interested in what you want. I'm just going to build you a bathroom. It'll be ready on Saturday." I mean, who's happy with?
Rod Argent and Colin Blunstone, they both told me this. they worked so closely together when they were doing the zombies, and still today, that Colin waits for Rod's cues as far as the bounce, the phrasing. He says, I said, you don't have a problem with that? He says, we work. I'm happy with that. I like the direction.
I would have given anything for that. I had that with Beeb. We used to work so beautifully together, and that's why we did the duo album. It was just a joy because, when I first came to Melbourne, I flattered with Beeb for a year or two, and we just spent all of our life just singing together, working our harmonies together, and just our phrasing and how we're strumming our guitar. Like, we spent hours doing that. And so to me that was all the work that, like, the harmony between Beeb and I was like Lennon and McCartney. It was like Simon and Garfunkel. It was like the Everly Brothers. They're the people that we were so tight and so interested in getting our phrasing perfectly. So when Glenn comes into the mix, we the two of us could follow him, because he either couldn't or wasn't interested in trying to follow us. Glenn marches to the beat of his own drum very much.
Is there one song he really, really didn't like that you wrote that he couldn't wrap his hand around?
Well, there's a couple. Well, firstly, I've mentioned this to you before about Lady, where he never liked the song, but he eventually got selected for Sleeper Catcher, and he went out, and as he was going out to record, he said, I hate this song, don't you? And I said, I know, Glenn, but we're going to be recording it. And so he went out and did a magnificent vocal. So he's very, very professional. But I remember on a rare occasion, I do remember this. I came off tour and we were getting ready for one album, and I had a lot of songs, and it might have been 35 songs. And Glenn sat down and I played him all these songs, one after another, and he did not like any of them, many of which got recorded later. But that's the problem. That was the problem, in that I'd be so excited about a song because I could hear musically what the band could do with it. But I would say that Glenn wasn't a good, didn't have a great A&R ear. Like when he presented Cool Change, he wrote it like a reggae song. So it wasn't like it is on the record. The band made it into the wonderful ballad that it is, keeping Glenn's melody, of course, because he was not able to spend the 3 days in the studio that it took to take it from a reggae song through to a country song, to a rock song, to whatever, and end up with that ballad. That took 3 days' work without Glenn being there, because he was not musically able to, but he wasn't patient enough to say, well, this isn't working as a reggae. What can we do? Let's try it, I don't know, as something else.
Is he not wired that way? Maybe he's just not. Sometimes I wonder if it's nurture nature. Is he just not? It's that old thing when we're in elementary school and your parents finally tell you, oh, that girl doesn't like you, but she's an apple and you're an orange. It's wiring. Yeah. It's not. But is it? I mean, some people just don't have the machinery to get into the minutia of stuff.
No, and that's Glenn. So it used to frustrate the hell out of me, but I understand it completely, because you see, I could never do what he can do on stage to an audience. I mean, people love Glenn. He is a major part of why our band was successful. His rapport with the record company, with press, with all sorts of people. He's a really warm, wonderful person to particularly people he meets for the first time. But that persona did not express itself in the band. Most always, he would be down the back of the bus on his own, and we would be up the front talking about everything forever.
But how do you feel being in the world now?
The world is a struggling entity, and it reflects the people living in it. The only thing wrong with the world at the moment are the people living here. We've got enormously, like, there's some wonderful things going on, and there's an army of people really working to fix a lot of the pollution problems and a lot of the issues that we've got. But we will never really really evolve as a planet until we start accepting the differences. The differences that we all have is what makes humanity great. And yet, as soon as it's just this non-acceptance of another person's skin color, their religion, the way they live, what they do, this is the problem. And so I think that, and apart from, the corporate greed and all the rest of the unfair things with banks and the whole monetary system and how unfair all that is, but it's just, we all know that the problems of the world with the starvation that's there, it could all be fixed. If we can find unbelievable billions of dollars to build bombs and all the war machinery, yet we can't put our shoulder to the wheel to do something about poverty, to homelessness, for instance. So why we can't support people that can't afford a home, why we can't put food into people's mouths that don't have it. It's just crazy.
Like the basic things, Maslow's triangle, the basic things of life that you need, it seems they can't,
Yeah, and it's the easiest thing to do, and yet we can't find the will the people that are pulling the strings don't have the will to do it. I've had a little insight into this, in that with my pet thing is, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but in Australia, like, the arts do not rate a mention. It's never ever mentioned, and yet everybody wants. Is it the same in Canada?
It's not good.
No. So everybody here wants to be able to go to a film. They want to go to say see a concert or a show or theatre. Yet it is becoming harder and harder and harder. And virtually the last time a decent Australian film was funded, or a theatrical show, I can't even remember. And we've become a dumping ground for the American culture. Like, everything that comes out in America.
There's no funding for Australian films in Australia.
Very little.
We have that. We have that.
Well, the point is, what I've been trying for years and years and years, and to try and get a funding start for my musical, and so nothing coming from government, nothing at all, and we've got a show that can bring people to Australia that could, and the tax dollars would get paid in Australia, but the government are just not interested. Okay, not been able to do that. But more to the point, we've approached very, very wealthy people, a lot of them, and they're just not interested in supporting the arts and putting something amazing into the world. People that are very, very wealthy just seem to want to become more wealthy, or they're saying, well, I need a 20% return on my money. And I've got hundreds of millions, but if I'm going to put $1 million into a show, that's risky business. I need to get 20% back, and quickly. And my feeling is, why?
Yeah.
What would you ever do with that money? You'll never spend what you've got. And it's not just a one-off thing. It's a continuous thing, in that the theatre promoters in Australia have they bring in Hamilton. Okay, they might want 20 million to put on Hamilton in Australia. And so they just ring their circle of investors. They just, or their accountants and say, look, you put this much in, this is how much you get back. Fine, I'm investing in Hamilton, or I'm investing in Harry Potter or something. Then they go and book the theatres out in Australia for years on end, so as no one else can get in. And then I turn up and say, look, I've got this wonderful show, and I need to build sets. I've got to, have it designed. We've got to do all this stuff, and we need this much money. But then what's the guaranteed return on it? And the response to that is, well, I don't know, because we don't. It's not Hamilton. It's not Harry Potter. It's a new show, and for the
LRB and Cachet in Australia. I mean, you guys are one of the biggest bands of all time.
Yeah, well, the show has got international legs.
Yeah, of course.
And so this is why I've always felt, I've not been talking about my show until recently, because I think there's got to be an angel investor who loves Little River Band music, that has experienced what our music means to them in their life. And they might be sitting there thinking, look, I'm sitting on this pot of gold over here. I love this music. I'm in a position to make it happen. And I know for a fact that most of the shows that get onto Broadway have got angel investors behind them, people that want to be there opening night, that believe in a show or something like that. And so that's why I'm being more public now to say, we have got an incredible show. Do you want to be part of it, or do you just want to keep your money and go and buy a chicken farm or something? I mean,
what about Farnham? When Farnham was in the band, what was his relationship like with the rest of the band? Was he hungry? Because
well, John was like the opposite. That's why I loved the Farnham years, is because John was always sort of part of the band, but and musically, Farnham is a super musician. Like, he's one of the best musicians that I've ever worked with. Like, it's not just his unbelievable singing voice, but like, we were doing stuff in like 7/4 and in the later years. He is one of the great musicians that I've ever worked with, whereas Glenn was really just a singer, and he had a rock persona that Farnham didn't have, and Glenn was the perfect frontman for Little River Band, but Farnham was the perfect singer for the songs that I was writing. You see, this is the thing, that I needed a hybrid of the both together. But as a musician and as a songwriter, I just loved Farnham, because he taught me so much about singing. For a start, I had to really up the ante on, because I was singing head voice on top of John, and
right.
He's one of the great harmony singers that's ever existed. So when you've got Farnham singing in a vocal group, it's just like a level that I don't think that the level has ever been surpassed on what we did. And that's why I've put on masterpieces. So if you listen to Love Letters, have you listened to, I Know It, but Love Letters with Farnham, and the harmonies between John Farnham, Beeb Birtles and myself in a live performance, I doubt whether there's been a better live performance of harmonizing ever. It was incredible.
What are your three favorite songs that you didn't write in LRB? Can you be objective? I mean, I'm sure you can.
Absolutely. Well, no, my number one song would be like Beeb's Birtles' Light of Day. I think that is as good as we ever produced. I did write a lot of the songs, but I'm just trying to think the ones that I didn't write. Well, I put on Masterpiece, there's a song called Blind Eyes, which was a co-write between David Hirschfelder, John Farnham, and a guy called Chapman. I can't think of his first name. That to me was a wonderful song. And I guess the other one would be When the War Is Over, which was written by Stephen Presswich, he was in Little River Band for the No Rains album, and he was with Cold Chisel in Australia. So definitely our version, Little River Band's version of When the War Is Over, is, I think, the definitive version, and it's an incredible song. It's iconic in Australia, but it's so topically correct now with what in the hell's going on in the world. This song, When the War Is Over, boy, you need to check that out, because it's if you don't know it, it's pretty heart-wrenching. A wonderful song, and I think LRB really nailed that. And so that's a Steve Presswich composition.
In 77, I remember looking at the album title and reading it like this: Diamantina Cocktail. It was like a Vegemite. Later, we figured out what it was, and then in a few years later, in 82, we had to find out what a Vegemite sandwich was, thanks to Men at Work. Whose idea was it to name the album?
Yeah. Well, we had. I'm not good at remembering names, but I know it was Joe and Ray were if you like, what would they be called? Designers, people that we went to them and said, look, we're looking for album title, we're looking for a cover, concept cover, and they came up. They did Sleeper Catcher, they did First Under the Wire, and they did Diamantina Cocktail. They did those three albums. It was their bulldog that was their own pet that they put on the cover. But they came up with that thing because we'd never heard of that. It was apparently looking into the history of Australiana, if you like. And it was something that they said, look, what do you think of this? It's a cocktail made with an emu egg and whatever. I've never even tasted it, nor do I wish to. But and so they dressed us up in these period costumes, and that's what came out. But then again, once again, our faces are not on the cover. That's the problem. And so we never realized that we're just slowly building like a problem for the to allow the deception that's going on with the American band now, because we never became famous like Elton John did, because his face was there. Everyone knew him. People knew.
Yeah, on Eagles, almost every album. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we never, and it wasn't even thought to be important. I mean, I wouldn't know who was in Supertramp or some of those other, even Pink Floyd. I would have no idea what those people look like, because back in those days, it was just Dark Side of the Moon. You know? But
it was cool for some bands where, like Led Zeppelin 4, for instance, didn't have one. Yeah. It was cool for some bands. Somehow it worked for prog and some rock bands.
Yeah, but the reason for, say, Led Zeppelin, they were so massive. I mean, you just simply couldn't replace Jimmy Page and have someone else in there, because the millions of fans that they had knew, you see, that they knew that was Robert Plant and Jimmy Page and John Bonham and those sorts of people, because they were so massive. We were not at that level of world domination that Led Zeppelin were, and might I say, like the Beatles did it all with just the White Album without even a title on it. I mean,
yeah,
that's the ultimate in fame. But I might say that every album of the Beatles, they had their photos. I mean, you would get that package, you take out the photos, you put them up on your wall. Everybody knew intimate details of John, Paul, George, and Ringo. It was just a marketing masterstroke, the way that they mastered that band. We never, ever realized the importance of that.
Well, back then, branding wasn't. Back then, this like Kiss started doing it. Jimmy Buffett started. There's certain artists that really did branding incredibly well.
Yeah,
right?
John, the Beatles taught everyone the value of branding.
Yes,
and yet we didn't listen. Like you're talking Buffett and these sorts of people, they're doing this is 10 years later or more. Yeah. But the Beatles said the Beatles have still got the greatest logo of any band in history.
Maybe, do you think it was because it was the Beatles? I sometimes wonder about that, because everyone knew everyone in the band, John, Paul, George, and Ringo. It was really, it just slipped, just came right out.
Yeah. Yes, it was that, but but nobody took notice of the fact that they've built a brand that is the number one brand from their logo to everything. No one's done it as well as that, and probably never will. But we never even had those discussions. So, well, hang on a minute. We only cared about the music. How about making us famous? Isn't it important that everyone knows who Glenn Shorrock is? Everyone knows Beat Birtles. Everyone knows Graeham Goble, at least that. But it wasn't a thing. It wasn't a thing back in the day. And anyway, I'm trying to do it in 2022.
I man to man, let me just say I needed to hear that tonight.
That's nice.
No, I really did. Thank you. Because that's why I had to mention it again. I'm going, oh, right. You know, we've talked about spirituality and quite a bit in I think the first interview or the second, where, you know, the best times of my life were the times where I paid attention to things. Best times of my life or when I was able to say, okay, you're working from here to here, unless something springs on you, you know, but you work from here to here. This is resting time. Go meditate. You know, go talk to I'm not a religious guy, but go talk to your maker, go talk to your guides or whoever. But there's some, you know, you feel it, you know, it's there. The best times of my life where I'd stop and look at people and realize that we have so much more in common than we ever did. And years ago, I stopped doing that, and I just started getting back to it now.
Yeah. Well, you see, you keep saying, I'll do a little psychotherapy on you now. You keep saying, I'm not a religious guy. I'm not a religious guy. I would recommend you don't need to even say that. I think that because religion is like if you're in the Catholic Church or if you're a Muslim and you sit down and you go on the mat and pray 5 times a day, that's an activity of being religious. Okay. But what I think is you're interested in spiritual matters. So rather than say, like the Americans say, they might say, well, are you religious? And I say, no, but I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe in Buddha. I believe in Zarathustra in terms of I'm interested in the spirit world and of the great entities that have come through in history. I'm interested in the spiritual content of the Hindu religion, the Buddhist religion, the Islamic religion, not the religion, the activity of the religions that all these things have become, because then it becomes dogma. So I'm interested in what Steiner said, that you cannot separate the spirit world from the physical world. It's all the one. And so when I go for a walk in the bush, or I live in beautiful bush in Australia, like I see the trees and the birds and everything as companions from that are all part of this wonderful spiritual world that we live in. It's not about and there is this one spiritual world, and it's not about, well, you're a Catholic and you're a Islamic and we can't agree. It's nothing about the dogma of the religion. That's the problem in the world, that we've divided it into, if you don't believe this, then I don't want to know you, or I'm going to war with you because you're this and that. That's not it. Let's forget about all of that. It's about, well, I'm interested in the spirit. You clearly are. And because you see it in your children, you see it in your partner, you see it in the people that you talk to all the time. When I'm talking to someone, I'm talking to their soul, not to their face or what they're wearing or anything like that. They're a soul that's come into my presence for an amount of time. And that's what, if we treated everyone like that they are a soul approaching us, as opposed to a person who's famous or not famous, or somebody I can get something from, or I won't be talking to him because I know that he's an atheist. I don't want to talk to him. I know that she's I don't know, whatever. You say, well, they're your beliefs. Some of them ill-conceived, some of them not ill-conceived, but that's not you. You're just a spirit soul living on the planet, no better or worse than me. You just got a different way of doing it. And if you choose to be an atheist, then I would say, well, if that's for now. Maybe you'll think differently tomorrow. But the point is not to judge it.
Yeah.
You see, when you're in a religious organisation, there's a certain amount of judgment by default there, because you're saying, well, look, we believe this, and all these other people don't believe that, so we're judging. And nobody's got all the facts anyway.
Yeah.
That's what's so insane about it. You can't prove any of that. So you could just have to accept a person as they are and just say, well, they're a struggling soul the same way as I am. So you, any person that's even interested in talking to another person like you do, of course you're a spiritual being. You're interested in finding out what makes people tick, and what can I learn from that? And then if you take something away from an interview you do, then that's a spiritual experience.
Every time.
Yeah. So you're having an experience, a spiritual experience. So I think that's nothing to do with religion. It's just, to me, the most important thing in a human relationship is finding someone that you can talk to and hopefully learn something from that you didn't know or have any interest in before you met that person. That to me is the most important reason as to why we need to connect in community, because you don't want to just speak to someone that just knows everything you know, or I want to learn something different. Yes.
You know, lately someone was asking me, Jason Sheff of the guy who replaced Peter Cetera in Chicago.
Yeah.
And he asked me, because we communicated a lot, but we never saw each other. We never talked like this. Yeah. So we talked for 3 hours, like kind of like our conversation. Anyway, he said that he asked me, he says, well, what have you learned the most from talking to the people you talk to? I says, more things about life than the hits, because that's kind of how I'm wired anyway. And if I can veer it towards who they really are, or what they really believe, or the important things in their lives, the audience responds to that. It's interesting. It does. I mean, the salacious stuff they always do, and that's fine. But they do. He said, I wake up every morning pretending I'm in a Hallmark Hall of Fame film. I said, what do you mean? My God. He says, well, I wake up every morning pretending that I'm really 20 years older, but I've come back to this age to get he says, that's my everyone's got little tricks, right? He says, that's my trick. And then he went on and on about, this kind of stuff that you talk about and I talk about. And those are the most interesting things to talk with another human being of. You talk about the weather, and that's the exchange. You make a connection at Starbucks with someone. But if you talk about the other stuff, that's a bonus. That's real nice if you could talk about something a little deeper.
Well, I think that's the big advantage of the Zoom calls and things today that we never had back in the day, because normally by the time you got through, where did you get the name of the band from? What's your next album? What town are you going to next? That's the end of the interview. Yeah. You never did the long form interview, because once you get all that housekeeping out of the way, then you can then start talk about other things that are actually more interesting. And I think this is why channels like you've got and there are others that are just so interesting. And it's why live TV in Australia, at least, is just dying a death. Everyone's on YouTube watching.
Suffering here too.
Yeah, but you see, because this content is more interesting. I would rather sit down and spend an hour of my life listening to somebody that I'm interested in listening to than just watching, the 10th rerun of some show that you've seen a billion times. And this is why this is more, and that's why it's the Netflix series. I mean, that's another thing that we could do. I mean, I would have enough material from the LRB story and this musical to do a 4-part, 6-part Netflix series. That could be another way of getting our story out. But this is what people want this day. They just don't want, well, there's many people that don't just want the surface stuff anymore. They want to dig down and they want to try and not just be entertained, but be educated and learn something that they're interested in. And that's a fantastic format for it. And this is the wonderful thing that you're doing and others like you, and it's the service you're giving to other people. You see, that's the only way you can have success in the world. You've got to give to others. I've done it through my songwriting. I've given, and my music, that's enriched people's lives because they've gone and purchased it. Well, you're doing the same in that you're putting your time and effort into creating so-called entertainment, but it's not just entertainment. It's a teaching. We're teaching each other. I've taught through my songwriting for those that are willing to listen and that seek it out. You're teaching through your interviews and allowing people to express themselves, and some people will respond really positively to it. Others won't care, but it doesn't matter. If you, at least you're providing the forum for somebody to have the opportunity to say something that may help someone. That's what it's about, because we're all trying to raise together. I wrote a there's a line in my song "The Net" that was on the Net album, and it says, "We're going as fast as the slowest one in our race."
That's a good line.
And what that means is that we have a responsibility to drag everyone up at the same rate. You can't be up here when there are people down here, and you can't be down here if there are people up here. And so the people, we're coming up together. And that's everything from the environment to where we were talking earlier about the wars and all that sort of stuff. We're on the same situation, whether it be climate change or whatever. So we have to be mindful that we're responsible, one person at a time, individually, for bringing everybody to a higher consciousness than they had maybe last week or the next thing. Mm-hmm. And it's just talking about stuff, and then one day the light goes on and they think, well, I've recently become vegan, and so many people are saying, okay, not having dairy anymore, we're going to go plant-based. That's starting to happen worldwide. No judgment on people in my own family. I've only got one son is vegan, the rest all eat meat. That's fine. It's not an issue. But it's at some point to be able to make a statement, and then suddenly McDonald's and the like are starting to making plant-based. So there's just a change in consciousness by people being prepared to say what they believe, and then people saying, well, I think that's a good idea. I think I'll do that. I'm going to give that a shot. That's what you're providing a format for that.
By the way, quickly, your son put together that trailer, right?
Isn't it great? I mean,
it's fantastic. I mean, so again, refresh my memory. Pardon my ignorance. Does he do filmmaking scores? Does he what does he?
Well, he did, but basically, he once again, he's a phenomenal musician. That's one of my sons. This was my son Nathan. I just work with him all the time. Him and my other son Joshua, the three of us have worked on this musical together. They're just phenomenal musicians. But Nathan mainly is just he lives off music. He's a wonderful bass player, and he sings and plays guitar. Him and his wife live doing weddings and stuff here in Melbourne, and he does some composing work on commission for ads and stuff, mainly out of Europe. But basically, he's now writing amazing songs, beautiful songwriter, and but there's just no avenue for his immense talent. That just doesn't exist. He's not, and he's not looking for it, in that he just wants to write and record his own songs, which he does here in my studio, and we work a lot together. You know, we work a lot together on the musical, but he often comes to me and we sit down and he might say, Dad, what do you think of this? And he listens, and I listen to him too, because if I've got something, I'm saying, well, what do you think here? I'm harmonizing this a certain way. What do you think of this, say, F sharp, or should it be the G or whatever? And he is like enormous ears and is helpful to me so often. So when it came to doing that amazing trailer, which I hope you would play on your show, I said to Nathan, look, we need to do a trailer. And that was a trailer that we did for the musical.
But didn't you get a copyright strike on your own music? You didn't get that on YouTube, a copyright strike on your own music? Because a lot of people, musicians that I know, when they put up their own music, YouTube gives them a copyright strike, even though it's their music.
Well, you see, firstly, the melodies have all been changed on that, even if you like to look at it, because it's all in the one key.
I saw it. I noticed that.
Yeah. And the thing is that it's advertising product that the copyright owners own. And what they want it to go out there and promote the ultimate hits and masterpieces, because that's what it's for. But that was originally done for our musical, and so Nathan took his brilliance to be able to take 10 or 12 LRB songs and put them into a 2-minute clip, all in the same key, but just with this incredible orchestral thing. I mean, it's a work of genius.
It's unbelievable. When you were writing a song, before I let you go, did you have to continue it till you close the file, or could you leave the file open overnight, metaphorically speaking?
Yeah. Well, what I experienced many times was sometimes 3 days, up to 3 days before a song would emerge, I would start to feel different. I would feel, honestly, John, I would feel like, hang on, I feel a bit different. I think a song's coming through. That would be up to 3 days, and one, at least more than once, I would come up with a title of a song, and then I think I'm going to write a song called this. But more to the point was what I really know was that when I was right in the experience of receiving and working with and writing a song, I would feel I'd feel very different in my body. It's like something's entered into me, and it's sort of like a contact from something, and it says, okay, it's sort of like we're sending you this. It's coming, and I would know, and I could be talking to you or having dinner or something, and I would think, okay, or somebody might say something. Do you know that wonderful story of Larry Hart, where he wrote My Heart Stood Still? Do you know that incredible story? Well, he was in a cab with a couple of other people in Manhattan somewhere, and a cab came through a red light or something and just narrowly missed them. And the girl sitting next to Larry Hart said, "Oh, my heart stood still when that happened." And he wrote that down. And then, of course, that moment, that wonderful song, My Heart Stood Still, which is an American standard, that then entered the physical world because he was observant enough to hear that. And so that's what used to happen to me. Sometimes somebody would say something, or I'd be put on alert. Basically, I would be put on alert to say, we're sending you something, not knowing what it was, but I would know almost certainly within the next 3 days that I'm going to suddenly, a melody and lyric would appear in my head. Not always, but many, many times that would happen. And I would be forewarned of it. And it might even be when I'm out to dinner back in the day and suddenly it appears. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to keep it going in my head while I'm having a conversation with someone because I need to get to a tape recorder. I need to do something before it goes away. Yeah. That used to happen all the time.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. What an interesting man he is. Very complicated, very smart gentleman. I always love talking to Graeham Goble of the Little River Band. Remember, join our Patreon, get early access to all our videos. You can make a donation to the channel if you want. The links are in the description. But comment on our videos, share our videos, and subscribe to our channel. I'm John Beaudin. This is Rock History Book. Take care of yourself.